So can we talk, you know, the elephant in the room. What is the elephant in the room? Well, the room, if you're an audiophile, is room acoustics. It's an issue for a lot of us. I've been there, I know. This room that I use is actually a great sounding room. The walls that you don't see in these videos are not parallel to the wall behind me. So it's not a typical rectangular room. So reflections and all that are much less than most rooms. Certainly any other room that I've ever lived in. It's the best sounding room by far. But most rooms, most of us have rectangular rooms. And, well, whether they're small or whether they're large, they're not built for acoustics, right? That's not the primary goal of an architect, is to make a room that sounds good. No. So, depending on your luck. Now, I'll tell you about some rooms that I've had in my life. When I moved to Brooklyn Heights the first time in like 1978, I had this amazing apartment. It was just luck that the floor was a suspended wood floor. The walls were kind of flimsy walls, and I had Snell type bass speakers. They made a lot of bass, but in that room, basically the bass was going through the floors and through the walls, and there was no boom. The bass was fast, it was deep, it was tight, fantastic. Then I moved. The Manhattan apartment was not great. That room looked like a normal room. It was 11 by 18, but the walls were cinder block. They were finished with plaster, obviously, but the walls were super solid, and the floor was concrete, and the ceiling was concrete, so nothing escaped that room. And it was really bad for bass. Lots of bass boom, just bass issues beyond belief. And I tried everything. I never really cured that problem, and I wound up getting other speakers. So the same speakers with same electronics in the room in Brooklyn sounded great. Same stuff in Manhattan. So it was so frustrating. I eventually had to ditch the Snell speakers. So the ideal room is one that has early reflections and reverberation and bass under control. Some of us are lucky, some of us are not. So if you're in the frustrating position of dealing with a problem room, well, first thing we got to describe, let's say, room size. Small rooms, let's say we'll call a small room anything smaller than, let's say, 10 by 14 feet. The problem with small rooms is early reflections, that the sound bouncing off the walls, floor, and ceiling, because it's such a small room, they're close in time to the direct sound, and it creates this, basically this blur, this smearing of soundstage, and just, you're not hearing enough direct sound. You're just hearing this blur. Large rooms have an opposite problem of not early reflections so much as just a lot of sound bouncing around the room. Now, of course, in either case, you can minimize those problems by having, stuffed furniture, thick, big bulky furniture, and thick carpeting and drapes on the windows and all that. That will minimize those reflections and reverberation issues. But the bigger the room, I can almost say the bigger the problem, because dealing with all that just would take a lot of room treatment to tame. Small rooms, well, the problem is in that sense smaller, but you have less options in where to put the room treatments, meaning absorption panels, diffusion panels, and bass traps. So medium-sized rooms, which is, I guess, what the majority of rooms are, that they're bigger than small and smaller than large, 12 by 18 feet or so. That would be an average size room. And that's what most speaker designers are designing for, unless they're designing really gigantic speakers. They're guessing that it's going to be in a room of approximately that dimension, right? So it kind of works best. I'm making some leaps here, but you get the gist, right? But the problem with small rooms tends to be those early reflections and boomy bass. Now, when I get emails from people that have rooms that are 10 feet by 10 feet with 9-foot ceilings, which is practically a cube, that's a horror show. I mean, that's just, you got to do what you got to do. If that's your only option, If that's your only option, a cube room or a room that's close to a cube, the only practical solution is to get out of that room, to get closer to the speakers. Listen in the near field. The closer you are to the speakers, the more direct sound you hear and the less of the room sound you hear. And by the way, that solution of near field listening is free. So it's always a good place to start is in near field when you have a problem room. Start there. Just pull the speakers away from the wall if you can. If you can't, you get closer and you're going to hear a big improvement in the sound because there's going to be those pesky reflections and reverberation and bass issues are minimized. And by the way, as a little side issue, one of my friends tried that trick of getting the subwoofer. He has a subwoofer with some full range speakers, getting the subwoofer right next to the listening position. And he and I had talked about this many times, but he finally got around to trying that, getting the subwoofer in the near field, and he was shocked how much smoother the bass was when he was sitting right next to the subwoofer. So near field for speakers and subs is something to experiment with if you're at all frustrated with your room. But anyway, getting back to the issue at hand, let's start with the small room. The small room is going to probably require absorption panels, usually on the walls to the sides of the left and right speaker, because that's where the first reflection is going to happen. That's the place to start. If you have a small budget and you want to just take a stab at it, yeah, those side walls are where you begin with absorption. And then, if you can, diffusion panel behind you in the rear wall. That is step number 2. Now, of course, before I go any further, I'm assuming that the floor is not a bare wood floor or tile floor or marble floor or something. Bare floors are a major, major no-no because that's the first bounce. The sound leaves the speaker, bounces off the floor, early reflection, not a good thing. So the minimum really would be to just get a rug, a throw rug or something, and put it in front of each speaker. Or a rug that fills the front part of the room, even better. That would be highly advisable. And if for some reason you can't, well, let's say you live in a man cave. Let's say your room is a man or a woman cave, and you want to see how that works. What you do is take a blanket and just lay it in front of the speakers. Wad it up. Make it a thick thing to absorb the most it can, and listen again. Listen to the bare floor with the speakers, and then listen with the wadded up blanket or towels or something, and see what that does. You will be amazed. Now, some people, according to my friends at GIK Acoustics in Atlanta, Georgia, tell me that in some man caves, people just put sound absorbing panels on the floor directly in front of the speakers. Now, of course, you can't walk on them. But if it's a man cave or woman cave and you're going to be the only one in that room, it's not an issue. Again, something to consider. The people at GIK Acoustics and I really didn't talk about this that much, but I think the wall behind the speakers will benefit from absorption or diffusion, like I'm using diffusion here in this room. Or sometimes absorption, I just have a big, thick foam panel that I put up against that TV. That works too. So experimentation is always going to be the way forward in this. You gotta be open to that idea of just trying stuff. And hey, when all else fails, use headphones. No, I'm just kidding, because I know a lot of you people just seem to have an aversion to headphones as an alternative to speakers. But if your room is really bad, if you live in that cube, a marble cube that's 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet, get headphones. Don't even, you got to do what you got to do. I almost left out the ceiling, another reflection. So yes, many people hang absorption panels on the ceiling in front of the speakers. And that also can make a very significant difference, especially, well, whether your ceiling is high or low, it's definitely something to consider. And it is out of the way. I mean, they can look odd to a non-audiophile person, I admit that, but it's another tool in your toolbox of how to make your room sound better is ceiling absorption or even ceiling diffusion. But anyway, the basic rule, the simplest approach for most people, most of the time, if you don't want to go heavy into room treatments, and I would not recommend starting by assaulting your room with diffusers and absorbers and bass traps, just filling it with all that stuff is just potentially a huge waste of money. So you start small, you see if these treatments are helping or doing nothing or hurting, right? But the place to start, and the place that I started when I lived in Manhattan and I had that concrete room, was you put absorption on the walls in front of the speakers, to the sides of the speakers, on the side walls. And so you're minimizing the early reflections off those walls that are competing with this direct sound coming from the speakers. That's the place to start with room treatment, absorption. Absorption makes the most sense for most people most of the time. So I'm just giving you basic tools here, and you can apply them as you need, right? If you have questions, please don't ask me those questions in the comments, because right now I'm giving you the sum total of my knowledge about dealing with room acoustics. Better to check out the GIK website and ask your questions to GIK. I find them extremely helpful, and they're not like hardcore salesmen trying to sell you stuff. Definitely check out their site. Now, of course, there are many other companies selling room treatments. They're on the internet. I link to those as well. You got to do something. And if budget is tight right now, get closer. Get closer to your speakers and see if that gets you enough past the problem to go on being a happy listener or a happier listener. That's what we're shooting for. My name is Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show. Right now, we're closing in. We're closing in. It's within grasp of 150,000 subscribers, and that's thanks to you all. So if you have already subscribed, thank you so much for doing so. If you have yet to subscribe, there's plenty of room. Come on in. Join us on this journey. It's fun. But beyond that, you could check out my Patreon at patreon.com/audiophiliac. There's a link to that below. And there's playlists for speaker reviews. On this incredible channel, there's playlists for speaker reviews, headphone reviews, electronics reviews, and music reviews. Interviews with average audiophile folk and legends of the audio industry. And that's it. My work here is at last complete. Thank you again for watching. And I really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.